is CBC Radio 1, 89.1 FM in Waterloo Region. Drop it, spin it, move to it, experience it.
Watch this.
Sway to R&B on Marvin's Room. Own the rhythm with Saturday Night Jazz. Catch the Indigenous next wave on Reclaimed. Savor the sounds of the Francophone world on C'est Formidable. Swoon to the passion of the best of backstage with Ben Hefner. Saturday night means music on CBC Radio 1 and on the CBC Listen app.
CBC Toronto, here's the news at 12 o'clock. It's partly cloudy and 1 degree in the city right now. Good afternoon, I'm Trevor Dunn. The rush continues today for Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 booster shots. There are lineups at pop-up vaccine clinics, including the RioCan Centre in Mississauga. That is one of 3 locations where GoVax mobile clinics are providing first, second, and booster shots of COVID-19 vaccines. Many people are waiting in line for hours.
So we got here at 7:30 for a 9 o'clock start.
Figured it was going to be like this because of the shortage, so I'm just hoping to get the booster shots.
But the wait's okay, honestly, as long as we just end up getting the shot. There's people that are cutting in front of people, but it's okay. Hopefully everybody gets what they came for.
Many people were also there hoping to get their hands on some rapid COVID-19 tests, but there was uncertainty around whether they were going to be available. The demand for walk-in shots is expected to grow as people find the provincial booking site booked up all the way to February. Let's take a look at the COVID-19 numbers now. Ontario is logging 3,453 new cases of COVID today. The number of people testing positive for COVID-19 in Ontario hospitals is up again today, but that all-important number of COVID cases requiring critical care is still holding steady. In fact, there were more COVID-19 patients in Ontario ICUs 2 weeks ago. But with COVID-19 vaccine efforts ramping up, public health units collectively administered their highest number of vaccines in a single day yesterday, with more than 206,000 shots and more than 187,000 of those being booster shots. The provincial government has said it intends to ramp up capacity in the coming weeks to administer between 200 and 300,000 booster shots every day as Ontario faces a surge of Omicron variant cases. Changes are coming to some Toronto hospitals as they prepare to deal with this rise in case numbers and the impact it could have on the healthcare system. CBC's Linda Ward has that part of the story.
It's likely to go past the peaks of what we've experienced at any point in the pandemic in the next few days.
St. Michael's epidemiologist Dr. RizwanK says we're on the cusp of an all-time high in new infections.
When that happens, the number of people who get sick and end up in hospital means that a lot of the other essential services we provide has to be temporarily put on hold.
His hospital under Unity Health is putting off non-essential outpatient care and non-urgent surgeries, and outpatient visitors won't be allowed in. And at other hospitals in the city, the rules have changed too. Sunnybrook Hospital will only allow inpatients one fully vaccinated visitor. At UHN, no visitors for those who are in hospital for less than a week. They're also looking at what work can wait.
See it as a fast-moving place here rather than a tsunami.
Kevin Smith, the head of UHN, says there are only about 10 COVID patients in their ICUs, but
you have predictions based on the number of positive tests that is likely to come rapidly because of the numbers. This exponential growth every 2.5 days or so. It's daunting, unquestionably.
And they're reluctant to delay care with an already estimated 419,000 surgeries backlogged across the province. Linda Ward, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario's premier got his COVID-19 booster shot today. Doug Ford received the vaccine dose at a pharmacy in Toronto. He says it's critical that all Ontarians protect against the Omicron variant. In other news, Toronto police statistics show the number of homicides involving mental health issues has almost doubled during the COVID-19 pandemic. It has played a part in a 32% It's played a part in 32% of investigations so far this year. In an interview with CBC News, Toronto's top homicide police officer says he's seen an increase of murders involving members of the same family. Jasmine Sepiadis has the story.
COVID obviously has a huge strain on people, their stressors in life and their mental well-being.
Inspector Hank Itzinga leads Toronto's homicide unit.
Intimate partner violence is slightly up, but not as much as the familial violence. You know, the son killing the mother.
There has been a number of familial homicides this year. In February, Kathleen Hatcher was killed following an attack in a quiet Etobicoke Park. At the time, residents were in disbelief.
Very scary. I never thought that kind of thing happened here.
Hatcher's son was later charged. In September, another man was arrested for allegedly murdering both his parents in their Scarborough home. Then in October, a son was arrested for the murder of his mother after she was killed in her northwest Toronto home. Itzinga believes these familial homicides this year have had an impact.
I think it really accounts for the good chunk of the increase in homicides overall.
Toronto police report 81 murders so far in 2021, an increase of 11 over last year. Jasmine Sepiadis, CBC News, Toronto.
And you can see a full interview with Inspector Hank Itzinga tonight on CBC News at 6 on CBC Television with Dwight Drummond. Let's go to the weather forecast now for Toronto, Hamilton, and Niagara. It'll be a cloudy day today with a high of 3 degrees. Tonight, cloudy with a chance of wet flurries or rain showers this evening. Low going down to -3 overnight. For tomorrow, mainly cloudy with a chance of flurries and a high of 1 degree. That is a look at the news and weather from CBC Toronto. For news anytime, you can check our website, cbc.ca/Toronto. I'm Trevor Dunn.
Good afternoon, I'm Amanda Pfeffer, and this is Ontario Today. In this hour, how are you coping when the news is hard to take? 1-888-817-8995.
The province is applying a 50% capacity limit in indoor public settings, such as restaurants, bars.
Ontario reported more than 4,100 new cases yesterday, its highest single-day tally in almost...
This will likely be the hardest wave of the pandemic. But if we can control it and drive vaccination as hard as we can.
Grocery stores, shopping malls.
Over the coming days and weeks, daily COVID cases will continue to accelerate, with Omicron being the most transmissible variant we've seen yet.
What a difference a few weeks make. Just as we started to go back to the office, found daycare for the kids, ventured out to the theater, dared to plan vacations, Omicron is changing everything. Businesses are facing another upheaval. People are being let go. And the lineups are back, whether it's trying to get your hands on a rapid test or a booster shot, or just trying to buy a gift in a store with new capacity limits. Today, the league canceled all cross-border games through Thursday. At this point, a total of about 40 games have been postponed. Can't even count on your favorite sports team for distraction.
Oh, just going into that super disheartening pandemic wave, which I feel is inevitable. We all kind of have the same feeling like, here we go again.
Honestly, I'm kind of filled with despair.
The province says it wants to keep schools open as long as possible.
Over this past 2 years, if we have learned nothing, it's to anticipate the unanticipated.
For parents, the idea of facing another term of remote learning has them and their kids fearing the worst.
This is looking like the whole school year is done, when it should just be a little bit of a break for them and then they go back, but we really just have no clue.
This hour we have a psychotherapist who has been thinking a lot about how to keep going when there's so little control over the world around us. We're dedicating this hour to our mental health. After all, we're going to need it a lot to get through this next stage of the pandemic. How are we coping? And what are we doing to get by? 1-888-817-8995. Our Twitter handle is @CBC Ontario Today. And again, we are asking, how are you coping and what are you doing about it? Share your coping hack with us, 1-888-817-8995. Our Twitter handle is @CBC Ontario Today. Just want to read a tweet from a parent who captures the mood. She says, a shout out to all the parents out there still trying to make Christmas magic while navigating Omicron. I see you with your festive sweater and your dead eyes. Again, our number 1-888-817-8995. Today we're doing a little group therapy. Before the end of today, we'll hear from a Zen teacher who will take us together on a mindfulness exercise. Mihaela Andronik will join us for that. She teaches a workshop at the Professional Development Institute at the University of Ottawa. It's called Mindfulness as a Restorative Practice in Times of Uncertainty and Change. So you won't want to miss that. Our guest for this hour is Laura Kavanaugh. She is a psychotherapist who worked in clinical practice for more than 20 years. She's also a professor of behavioral sciences at Seneca College in Toronto. She wrote an introductory psychology textbook called Essentials of Understanding Psychology, and she's also co-author of an upcoming book on addiction called Hope Against Hope, Addiction Treatment and Recovery, and that will be published in February. Thank you so much for joining us for this hour.
Thanks so much for having me, Amanda. I'm really happy to be here.
What is the feedback that you're hearing from people about where they're at right now?
You know, the word I would use to describe it is disillusionment, which is almost, almost bigger than fear or disappointment, because like the person said in the tweet, which I love, because humor is a great way to cope and it put a smile on my face. We had an expectation, I think, that we were nearing the end, that we were starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it turned out to be the oncoming Omicron train, and when reality doesn't match our expectations, it's a very intense kind of disappointment, and we refer to it as disillusionment because it almost challenges a central belief, right? And I think for a lot of us, we thought, okay, if I follow these directions, if I do what I'm supposed to do, if I get vaccinated on time, we're going to be back to some version of normal, but the virus is going to do what the virus is going to do, right? And we don't have any control over that, and that's a tough one to cope with. We don't like unpredictability, and we don't like feeling out of control.
And we've had these kind of whiplash turns, right? That people are just sort of suddenly, like the speed of this is over the course of like 10 days, where you were feeling emotionally comfortable with everything that's going on, and then it's all tossed in the air.
Absolutely, and I think that is the defining characteristic of the last couple weeks, right? Is that what seemed sort of appropriately cautious or tolerable level of risk suddenly seems extremely reckless, and we're having to really rethink our holiday plans, our day-to-day plans on the go, and that requires a degree of psychological flexibility that can be hard to draw on, especially when we're under pressure.
And when you talk about that pressure, so there's all of this happening, going on, but then there are the lineups and the have-tos. Like, there's action that you must take. You must get a booster shot. You must get some of these rapid tests in order to continue on, going to see your mom or something, or whatever that is. And everywhere you look are lineups, and so there is that added kind of anxiety that the lineups themselves bring on, a kind of anxiety.
So absolutely, and I think patience is it can be a habit, but it's one that's quite difficult to practice, right? And we don't often have to draw on it in our digital age, right? We're used to kind of getting things at our fingertips, even at 24-hour. Something that we don't necessarily draw on all that often. There's a patience researcher who looks at patience as kind of being divided into three parts. One is interpersonal patience, so how do you deal with difficult people? One is life hardship, so how do you manage the big stresses of life, like the pandemic? And then the third is exactly what you just mentioned, the daily hassles. And the daily hassles are lineups and traffic and the grocery store running out of the last ingredient that you need, and none of these things, and boy, the pandemic sure has confronted us with this, right? None of these things are avoidable. We all have to deal with difficult people. We all have to deal with life's big hardships as they come. Right now there's a big collective one that we're all facing, obviously Omicron. feel disillusioned. It's normal to feel disappointed and frustrated and all of those things. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that negative feelings, they really have a momentum of their own, you know, and they can really drag us down very, very quickly. In acceptance and commitment therapy, that's sort of a third wave cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a principle called self as observer, where you remind yourself that you're not your feelings and you're not your thoughts. You're the one hearing your thoughts and the one listening to your feelings. And your thoughts are sometimes wrong, and your feelings don't always want what's in your best interest. So, I have a friend who says, don't confuse how you're feeling with how you're doing. And I would add to that, don't confuse what your feelings want with what you want. The difference between ourselves and our feelings really involves some values clarification. So if I can give an example of that, my feeling, I haven't seen my mom since the fall. My mom is 87 and she's in a nursing home, and my feelings are saying, go see her, I want to see her. But my values are, I want to be a good daughter. And in this case, that might mean going to see her, or it might mean not going to see her under these circumstances because it presents a risk. So the point is, like, when I detach from my feelings a little bit and take on the observer role, it gives me that psychological flexibility that we kind of really need right now, because the circumstances are changing, I want to say daily, but really it's hourly, isn't it?
So I think that our callers will give us some examples about how this is affecting us, and you can offer us this advice in a more precise way about how people can step outside of this storm of emotions that you describe. And people, I know that people are doing everything from taking walks to for some people it's information. They want to learn as much as they can. It helps them cope. For other people, it's the opposite. Turn off the TV. So we will walk through all of those. We've got Derek, who's in Ottawa. Derek, we're asking, how are you coping?
Yeah, good morning. Actually, I'm coping quite well. However, I am growing increasingly frustrated, and I'm feeling a real sense of anger now that I realize that all the pain, all the suffering, all the restrictions, all the economic impact that you're talking about is totally being caused by a minority of people in our country who will not get vaccinated. And the fact that they are driving this, they're the ones that are going to fill up the ICUs, they're the ones that are going to stop people from getting emergency health care. And why are these people not getting on board and supporting our society? And why is the government not talking about a vaccine mandate? That's what's making me angry, and I'm just getting increasingly frustrated now that I realize that there's people in our society who will simply not take an hour out of their life, go get vaccinated for the welfare of the rest of us. It's crazy.
Let me tell you, Derek, that I've come full circle on my feelings about that whole issue, and realize it's one of those other things that I just cannot control. And all countries, particularly in Europe and North America, are dealing with a contingent of people who, for many, many reasons, and some of them not so great, but for many, many reasons are choosing not to get a vaccine. And so I'm choosing sort of to accept that as a reality, particularly with Omicron, since it's seeming to be transmitted through people who are vaccinated as well. So I've kind of tried to let that one go. But let me go to our guest for this hour. Laura Kavanagh is with us, again, a psychotherapist. How useful is blame?
Well, when we want to, shame or blame has been used by societies for, forever, right? To kind of shape what's considered acceptable behavior. But it is important to remember, and I think Amanda really touched on this, that, when like anger, they say it's like drinking poison and expecting it to hurt the other person. And I think, when we can acknowledge the reality of human behavior, it can give us a little bit of well, as Amanda said, a little bit of acceptance. So we never get 100% compliance with anything. When the seatbelt mandate started, people resisted that. It took 2 full decades when they instituted the helmet law in 1979 for all NHL hockey players to wear a helmet. And obviously the difference with the vaccine, of course, is that they're putting other people's health at risk, right? And that is very frustrating. But I think,
particularly, I just want to note here that particularly for healthcare workers, for instance, who are watching unvaccinated fill up, perhaps we don't know yet with Omicron, but what could happen with the healthcare system. This might be when people are viscerally and directly in touch with that reality. They may, in fact, be more affected than others by this feeling.
Oh, absolutely, right? And I mean, the risk for most of us is to a certain extent theoretical, but the risk to healthcare workers who are dealing with COVID patients is very, very real and immediate. And I think what Derek said that I think is really important is the fact that this is a minority of people, right? And the way we make decisions often are what psychologists call descriptive social norms, which is just a fancy way of saying, like, what is everyone else doing, as opposed to injunctive social norms, which is what is the right thing to do. And right now, we're using a lot of injunctive social norms to try to encourage people to get vaccinated. But what's most likely to change the minds of someone, maybe not someone who's fully vaccine resistant, but those who are hesitant, the people who are vaccine hesitant and even vaccine resistant, the ones that are not like truly vaccine rejectors, what is likely to change their mind is just to see other people getting their vaccine and have that descriptive social norm of most people are doing this. And in some, we've done quite well in Ontario, right? In some areas, upwards of 90% of people have actually been vaccinated.
We are going to hear from people who are family members of people who are vaccinated or unvaccinated, and having these are our loved ones. These are people that we love, and when that anger is involved in that relationship, how should you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one, right? Like when it's right on your doorstep as opposed to theoretical. I think one piece of advice I would give to someone who is who has a family member who's an anti-vaxxer, is to give them space to change their mind, right? Because the more strongly someone argues their position, the more entrenched they become in it. If someone has been given space to kind of change their mind, they're more likely to be able to walk it back. Now, that's difficult because we really want to convince people, and we really want to convince people immediately. But that's not always possible, right? Like, we can't control others' behaviors. We can give them good arguments, but chances are if someone is hesitant or resistant towards the vaccine, they've heard some of these arguments already, right? And so often the only thing you can do is to control what you can control, which is your own boundaries, right? And you can say, like, I don't agree with your choice. I know you want to do what's best for your health, but I also want to do what I think is best for my health, and that means we can't gather in person. That means, I'm asking you not to visit our elderly parents, and so on.
These are some of the toughest conversations that people are having right now in their homes. Let's go to Mary, who's in Kempville. Mary, how are you coping?
The best I can.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of key things for me. Communication, and whether it be feelings of anger, frustration, or whatever other feelings, communicating them well to those around you is key, and then letting them go, especially for things you can't control, and I've heard this several times mentioned already. And also, I think helping others, I found, has helped me cope. My mom is relatively ill. She's not well, and I've been helping her a lot. And my grandson, taking him in for 3 days for virtual school and stuff. So helping others has helped me through this. and keeping things in perspective. And that I get from my mother, keeping things in perspective in the sense that, this too shall pass. And my mom's been through, the war, the Great Depression, and all kinds of other things. And so she adapts. So I look up to her. I get a lot of just spending time with her on the phone every day and in person. And like I said, helping others and being grateful for what we do have and what we can do. And it's not the end of the world.
The news was kind of just dragging me down. I was hearing all the numbers and rising case counts. But if I just took a step back and looked at myself, my friends, my family, we were all healthy, we were all happy. I just realized that I didn't really need it because it was just having a negative effect. And for social media, it's kind of just always been a cesspool of negativity. But I realized that with all the extra stress now, I really didn't need it. Maybe when the pandemic's over, I'll get it back. But it was really just not necessary at all and very counterproductive.
There's this scene in an old Simpsons segment where the kids can't watch TV anymore, and they all run outside, and the sun is shining, and everything is fantastic. And I'm just wondering about social media. Does it have that effect? Or are you still looking at your phone but at other stuff?
I'm not so looking at my phone anymore because I realize that if I get rid of my social media, I'm gonna have to just do it fully 100%, and it's gonna be just as bad if I'm constantly checking my phone and just craving my social media. So I just kind of train myself that I just use my phone when I need to call somebody, when I need to text somebody. I check my texts every so often, but I've kind of just removed my addiction and ridiculous dependency on my phone, and it's great. I mean, there's a big world out there.
Yeah, we've been hearing about, there was in the United States at one of the congressional hearings, someone from Facebook talked about Instagram, for instance, and its impact on, particularly on young women. And I'm just wondering if you have any insight now, having turned off the social media, on that whole side of things.
It's just that I found that people always present their worst and their best side on social media. They always show their best side, like all their, their best pictures and their best, posts. But in real life, they could be extremely depressed, suicidal. You never know, but you just see their best side. You also see their worst side. Like, they'll just say something that people don't like and just be like, if I see you, I'm going to kill you. But you'd be surprised how normal people are in real life. People aren't picture perfect, and people aren't evil. It's just people are normal. They're nice people.
Yeah, people are normal.
It's just such a different world in the real world.
John, really inspiring, and why don't we do a challenge to others who think that this might be a big difference. I appreciate your call, and I appreciate you. Our guest this hour, Laura Kavanagh. Laura, tell me about the impact of news, bad news, social media. How effective is this to cut out?
Yeah, I love what John did, and I think, kudos to you, John, because that is not easy. And I would say, and I say this to my clients, and I try to practice it myself, even if you can't delete everything, really try to limit that consumption of information, because our brain doesn't really differentiate between an immediate threat and a future threat, right? So we're designed to kind of scan the environment for predators. We're not designed for a 24-hour fire hose of information, and especially when it's bad news. So, our brain interprets that as us being in danger all the time. And I think sometimes we turn to the news because usually information gives us a sense of control, and it is important to be informed, and it is important just to bear witness, to what's going on in the world. But, the data shows that there's a drop in terms of mood after half an hour, and then another big drop after 2 hours, and another big drop after 2.5 hours. So, really think about, if you can limit it to less than half an hour, great. If you can't, try to keep it to less than 2 hours, and especially less than 2.5 hours, to avoid it really depressing your mood.
You're having a family gathering and someone has expressed, I don't want to, can we please agree not to talk about COVID? What do you do at the family gathering? Because for some people, talking about it actually, so this is different from just constantly being your eyes popping on the phone with all the COVID numbers and everything. This is sort of having a talk about it around the table. What do you do when you have a mixed match of a variety of how people want to cope with this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, that can be a challenge. I think, one of the principles of acceptance and commitment therapy, which is the approach I was talking about earlier, that really helps with psychological flexibility. And as I said, it's a third wave of cognitive behavioral therapy, so it ties in really nice with mindfulness, which is what we're talking about at the very end here. One of the things that acceptance and commitment therapy says is to a certain extent, we can't really control our thoughts and feelings. And so rather than focusing on I don't want to talk about this, or I don't want to think about this, we focus on our behavior, because that is what's in our control, right? And we always sort of have the opportunity to act as if. But the one thing I would say is, although it's important to maintain a positive mindset, there's such a thing as toxic positivity, and that's when we're unwilling to kind of face our negative emotions. So, if I agree that let's not spend, the whole family gathering talking about COVID and projections and worst case scenarios, especially. But at the same time, Viktor Frankl coined the term tragic optimism instead of toxic positivity. And it's okay to acknowledge that we're stressed, and actually acknowledging it and riding out that feeling and being able to enjoy, the sweetness of the family gathering, while experiencing, the stress or disillusionment that it wasn't maybe the holiday plans that you wanted, actually puts us in a stronger place psychologically, because we're not stuck in that experiential avoidance cycle. I don't want to think about this. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to feel this bad emotion. Instead, we're telling ourselves that, we can, if we experience a bad emotion, if we experience fear, it's just a wave that we have to ride out. And it's not, again, it's not us, we're just the one riding the wave, the self, in this case, the self is context. You're not the wave, you're the one riding the wave.
Jamie is tweeting, I'm fortunate to live in rural Ontario where going outside has never been more essential. I walk, read, write, cook, and keep looking up, take time for you. We want to go back to the phones, but Laura Kavanagh, being outside, why is that helpful? There's been a lot of research now into what humans get from being outside and taking a walk, being amongst trees. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so two things. I mean, number one, exercise is pretty much the closest thing we have to a magic bullet for both our physical and mental health. It's so important. And earlier, at the very top of the show, we were talking about patience. And patience, as I said, is a habit that you can cultivate. And one of the ways that we can cultivate patience is through the experience of awe. And what kind of experiences induce awe in us? Well, one study showed in 2018 that when they help participants experience that emotion of awe, they were more patient in other situations in their life. And the way they did that was they exposed them to nature, or they exposed them to music that they found awe-inspiring. And that's something we can all do. So if you get out there and you go for that walk, you look at the snow falling, you look at the stars, look at the way the snow rests on the evergreens, which is really beautiful. Then the next day when you're standing in line, or you can't get on the sign up, the booster sign up system, it gives you a little bit of a buffer.
Let's go to Max, who is in Kitchener. Max, tell me about how you're coping.
Hi. So during this pandemic, it's been really hard. I've had 2 birthdays, and I escaped an abusive household, and I'm living on my own. So it's been really tough, and something that's really helped me is managing my expectations, or working on not really having expectations, but more so hope. So I hope the pandemic it gets better, but I don't expect it to at any certain point in time, nor do I expect to have certain freedoms back at any certain time. I just kind of hope for it and let it be what it is. And your guest said before to just kind of notice what you're feeling and then learn to let it go instead of fixate.
Max, I hear that you just had a birthday. Is that right?
I had a birthday a while ago.
Okay, but may I share your age, or can you share your? You shared your age with our producer. Do you mind if I share it?
Sure, go ahead.
So I understand that you've turned 20, and this pandemic has eaten up these two fantastic years normally in an 18 and 19-year-old's life, right?
Yeah, and that's been really, really disappointing for me because I wanted to go to the club, I wanted to get a tattoo for the first time, I wanted to go to my birthday party, I've missed all of my friends' birthday parties, but you know, like, at the end of this is a tragic time, but it's something I will be able to tell my children or my grandchildren about, that I lived through this, and this is what happened to me when I was 20, you know? It's a life experience and an event that I can remember that I got through, you know? If I can get through this, then I can get through my next episode of depression, or I can get through the next panic attack, or the next week that is hard when I'm stuck at home by myself, you know? Go ahead.
You mentioned that through all of that, you managed to get up the focus and concentration to get out of a bad living arrangement, a living experience. How did you do that? How did you gather up through all of what was going on to do that?
It beats me, honestly. Humans are incredibly resilient creatures, and I didn't think I had it in me. It was stressful. I was constantly anxious and panicking, and I felt like my life was going nowhere. But, you know, I just kind of said, if I move out, if I leave, and things are bad, it doesn't change the fact that things are bad, you know? Like, things are bad if I stay, they'll be bad if I go. So it's time to take a chance and move on and try to get somewhere better.
Are you somewhere better?
Yes. I'm not constantly dealing with like re-traumatization or fear or intense emotions caused by PTSD. I'm able to just sit with my cat on the couch and listen to the CIBC radio and just live. And living alone is really hard, but it's definitely worth it.
For those who are listening who are feeling like they're in that situation, what's a key piece of advice?
Sorry, in what situation?
In a situation where they know they should leave, they're scared to go because the world is falling around. The world is falling down everywhere. So it seems like bad timing, you know?
Yeah. I guess what I'd say is there's no such thing as a bad time, right? There's times that are good and times that are bad, but there is no right time to do what's best for you. You do what's best for you when you're ready to, and if now is that time, then take the lead. If you're tired of what you're in, if you feel defeated, if you feel like you can't take it anymore, then go for it. What do you have to lose?
Max said, I want to ask Laura Kavanaugh just to weigh in here. What are you thinking about Laura Kavanaugh, again, psychotherapist with us for this hour? What are you thinking about as you hear Max's story?
You know, I think, Max, first of all, thank you for sharing such an inspiring story with us today and with the people listening. I know you're going to give people a lot of hope. You know, there's a couple of things that I think are really worth noting in your story. The first one is there's a phenomenon called post-traumatic growth, right? And that's when we go through a traumatic experience. Not that we don't suffer from it and not that the pain isn't real, but that we can experience some psychological growth on the other end. And you know, one of those things is often to manage life, trust in our own resilience. It can improve our own relationships. It can improve compassion towards others. And I'm hearing a lot of that in everything that Max said, you know, and especially, you know, the idea of offering other people hope, you know, that's really lovely to hear at this time, especially from someone who, you know, clearly went through a very tough time in the pandemic and you know, is we're all still going through it. You know, and the other thing that I would like to say is what she said about acceptance. So, you know, in dialectical behavior therapy, that's another third way of cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most important principles is radical acceptance, where you accept the world exactly as it is. And non-acceptance is really the source of our suffering, you know, and when we can practice radical acceptance, it frees us up both to make changes in our life in the way that Max did, but also to avoid the suffering that's caused when our expectations don't match with reality, right? When we feel like the world is not as we expected it to be. And I think the way Max phrased it is perfect, because we can have hope without having expectations around how that hope will play out, right? We can have hope that our society, that the pandemic will end in some way, in some form, that our society will will come out the other end, that people will come together, but we don't necessarily know the timeline.
Chad is in Toronto. First, I'd just like to say goodbye to Max, because I really think that a lot of people got a lot out of hearing from you and hearing, despite your young age, just a lot of, maturity in terms of how you are working towards making life better for yourself. So I really thank you for your phone call. Chad is in Toronto. Chad, go ahead. We're asking, how are you coping?
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a privilege to be speaking here. Coping. My ballet teacher used to say, adapt or die. And in comical sense, it is funny. But I think in this time, it's made me far more compassionate towards other people. But in an effort to be more compassionate towards other people, I've tried to be compassionate towards myself and being able to give to other people. And so something that I've taught myself to do is quilting during this time, and I haven't made one for myself, but everybody else in my life. But your producers were mostly interested in what I do in terms of the morning pages, and this is something a tool that I adapted from. I took from Julie Cameron's The Artist's Way, and it's a ritual that I've done for 10 years, but it's so paramount now, which is to write out 3 pages of longhand in the morning, and it's just a stream of consciousness, a mind sweeping of what's going on in my head.
Put it down on paper. Put it down.
Yes, just express it, get it out of my body, and then I put it away and I don't look at it again. And so it's done, and it's such a minor private accomplishment in the morning for myself, a private victory. And for me, I find that that's paramount for my mental health, and that if I don't do it, I feel kind of wonky throughout the rest of the day. So it's very helpful. It puts things in perspective, and it's private. Nobody has to know about it.
Sorting out a little bit of sorting out your feelings. It's great.
Yeah.
Two really great ideas. Laura Kavanaugh, writing a diary, writing stuff down.
Yeah, so, psychologists and psychotherapists love journaling. Chad, I did The Artist's Way, and I practiced the morning pages, and I think they are wonderful, right? For exactly that reason that he said, which is that it's an opportunity to express yourself in a form, kind of like a therapeutic forum that's really kind of private. Where you don't have any expectations around what you're trying to produce. So I think, 2 things that Chad said that really stood out to me. One is the idea of, when he said quilting, writing is the same thing. When we do these things, we get into a flow state where you can't think about anything else. Like, you can't scroll on your phone while you're quilting. All you can do is quilt, especially when you're learning it. And what getting into a
knitting, it would be the same. Zen state.
Piano,
Praying, praying.
You know, praying, really intense exercise, great sex, you know, anything where you can't think about anything else. And what that does, what the flow state does, is it interrupts that negative spiral. It gives us a break from it. And when we have that break from it, we get some relief. You know, it reduces the power of those negative emotions to pull us down.
Well, this is
Chad is doing that twice in a day with his quilting and his journaling, which is really wonderful.
And it's a great transition also because we have Mihaela Andronik on the line with us. She teaches a workshop called Mindfulness as a Restorative Practice in Times of Uncertainty and Change. What a great title.